All right, guys, what's up? And welcome back. I'm Ash, and I'm back here again with, on behalf of Grandmaster Sam Chen, as part of our ongoing series of interviews with other masters. Today, I'm here with Sifu Chris Heintzman of the Tibetan Hop Gar lineage. And without further ado, Chris, why don't you give us a little bit of an introduction of your personal background and history?
Okay. Hey, Ash, how's it going? Good to see you. I started with Grandmaster Chen. This is David Chen of the Tibetan Hop Gar system in Fayetteville in 1994. And I had already practiced several different martial arts at this time, and was just looking around for a place to train that would, push my edges, as it were, and wasn't finding anything around my local area, which was Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And then I traveled on the behest of friends of mine to go see Master Chen, and met him at his restaurant, the Golden Dragon. And he said, very simply, he says, so why'd you come to me? And I said, well, I just want to learn to fight better. I want to, improve. And he said, okay, go ahead, let's start training. That was it. That was like the process was over. He heard the words and he was like, okay, that sounds good. So
right, you said the right things.
Yeah, apparently for his taste, and so started that evening and just never stopped. I took a hiatus for about a year. Around 1996, I was going to school for massage therapy, and took a time away then, just so I could concentrate and also try and digest what he had already taught me. Like it was a download of information that was huge, and I didn't understand a lot of it, because even though I had started out in Wing Chun and Kali, I wasn't informed of a lot of the internal aspects of the training. And so between the new external style of movement that I was working on, and then the internal principles from the Tai Chi and the Qigong and the different arts coming that direction, I was just overloaded and kind of, I don't know, stupefied by the information. So I took about a year and a half, not quite, and ground on the information. So that when I came back to Sifu, we had a very different conversation at that point. So it was really beneficial for me, particularly, to do that. And like I said, after that, never stopped training with Sifu. We traveled all over the country and the world, competing and learning, and meeting masters like yourself and your teacher. We were so happy to meet kindred spirits, as it were, from so many different parts of the country and the world. And just now trying to keep passing on my Sifu's teachings in the best way that I know how.
So there's a couple of things that I just want to pause here and go into like a little bit more detail. So the one
Okay.
thing is that for people that may not be familiar with you, and I know you're a humble guy, so you're not going to brag on yourself, but Sifu Chris is the real deal, no BS. You badass mofo. Right, so you've got like quite an extensive background with the full contact competition.
Yeah. I did several the Iron Tiger challenges. Full, pro Sanda is what they used to call it. And now, I mean, it's funny, in Europe, Sanda is so much bigger than it is in the States. And I'm always hopeful that changes in the States. I'm hoping to be a part of that change coming up in not so distant future. But just getting more people working on Sanda competitions, because it's such a good blend right into the MMA world. And that really helped me out when I went in to doing MMA. And so it's a competition set of rules that works really well, and I think brings out a lot of the basic characteristics that people are looking for. So I was fortunate enough to train hard and be part of that and have some good matches. and learn a lot along the way, you know, good, bad, and
Right.
ugly.
Right. Yeah, so I think I haven't met that many people, maybe half a dozen people so far in my martial arts career, whereas as soon as you meet them, you're like, that guy can fight, and you've been one of them. So before we move on from here, just for anybody that's not familiar, I would like to talk a little bit more about your late Sifu, the Grandmaster David Chen, because he has
Yeah.
really, he's a significant part of the Kung Fu history in the United States, beginning back in the 1960s. You
Yeah.
know, for people who may not be aware, he was there for the Wong Jack Man versus Bruce Lee fight that's so famous today.
Yeah. Yeah, he delivered the challenge letter, and was going to fight because his teacher Ma Sik, who was 81 at the time of that, was the one who wanted to fight him, and he was like, no, Sifu, take it easy. Take it easy. I'll do it. And then Wong Jet Man was opening a school, so the small community decided that he should be able to do it because it would be good press for his school. Like, you know, it was this kind of relationship. And so Sifu delivered the challenge letter to Bruce Lee at his school, and then was referee to the fight when it went down. And it was like a clothing store type of a place that it happened in. It's not
Right.
like, don't believe the movies, they're lies.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's and it seems like the story, you know, it grows every time it gets told, but it's still you know, it's still a significant moment in the history. I mean, it's basically a turning point in the history of Chinese martial arts in the United States.
Yeah.
And so it's still you know, worth talking about a little bit, I think. And I think you know, I'm lucky to just have, you know, to know you and to have a direct connection to the history of Chinese martial arts in the United States in that way. So we're going to talk today specifically about Tibetan Hop Gar. Can you tell me a little bit about the overall like philosophy, concepts, and principles behind the Tibetan Hop Gar?
Yeah. So Tibetan Hop Gar, obviously suggestive of being of Tibet, right? Started there with the Dalai Lama, you know, a apocryphal story, likely, but seeing a crane and ape having a fight, and just appreciating the movements, right, of the two animals, and trying to embody the idea of like, okay, this is how I'm going to box. I'm going to be very deft and light like the crane, and real accurate and sharp, you know, and I'm going to be strong and agile like the ape is, and, you know, clever, you know, the things. And like Sifu always said that that animals, you know, it's not about like there's, you know, there's monkey kung fu, and we have the ape in our system, right? But all the hands don't look like the ape. It's not about, you know, looking and moving like a monkey, like monkey staff and jumping up and things like that. It's not so much about the look of the movement. It's embracing the spirit of the animal, as it were. So, you know, like monkeys are always mischievous and problem causing, and, you know, things like this, and interrupting, and these types of ideas. And so it started out this way in Tibet, and then traveled down the Silk Road, and, you know, eventually made its way into China. And the most famous practitioner, Wang Yanlam, learned it from Singlong Lama, and when he did, you know, really took to it, and eventually it ended up in Guangdong, southern China, Canton, some people say, and was the head of the 10 Tigers of Canton. So that, you know, the famous martial artists of the area of the South, you know, of Wang Keiying and Wang Feihong. were, father and son. And Wong Fei Hung, everybody knows the song. At least
Right.
at least in our kung fu world, everybody knows the
Right.
song. So he became the head of that after setting up a lei tai in front of a temple, and I think it's Hoi Tong Temple in Guangdong, and challenged people for somewhere around a week and a half, and was reported to deal with 150 challengers. Again, this could be hyperbolic, but long story short, he set it up and did well enough that all the people in the Canton Tigers recognized him as the top guy. So, and then my Qigong, Ing Ming, learned directly from Wang Yan Lum and his number one Wan Hon Wing in China. And he eventually came over right around 1970, I believe, into San Francisco, where Sifu Chen was living at the time. And my Sifu had learned from his father, Chin Chong, when he was around 7. He learned some Hop Gar already. And then when he was in California, learned different, he learned Foot Ga, he learned Hung Ga, he learned Tai Chi. You're in the parlance, you're learning from all these masters that were all around you. And so, but then he ended up back when Sifu Ing came over, he ended up back in Hop Gar and never left it, because he always had to, it was, he always had a question in his mind. He was getting in a lot of fights. Let's just put it that way. And he would do some of his favorite techniques. They would work to a degree, but they wouldn't necessarily stop the fight. It wasn't fight ending stuff. And he was trying all these different things. And then when he met Sifu Ing and started practicing with him again, it was a very different thing that he was being taught, and how it was emphasized, the power base and the type of striking and that, and he took to it and made it work. And that's, he always said it's like your back pocket knife, as they say. You might look like something else up front. Maybe you look like Tai Chi man, maybe you look like a wrestler or something like this, but your Hop Gar is your back pocket knife, and you always got it on you, and that's what you put up. So
All right, very cool. So give us an idea of like an overview of the training approach and the curriculum of Hop Gar.
So everybody starts out with the basic 6 patterns. So you're going to learn your basic stance force, ma, gong, and du. Horse, bow and arrow, and hang stance. Hang stance, kind of like the cat stance, some people call like that, but it's a little bit different, like format as far as how the toes are and that. But it's common stance work, right? And you start out with those. Build up some understanding of stance, you get that base structure, and then start moving into the striking. And so they start out with the basic 6 patterns, and these 6 patterns were meant to teach people how to box. So like you might spend a year or more learning the 6 patterns. They're not long, they're not like real long hand sets or anything like that. They're very short, very direct. They're meant to be able to you're meant to be able to box with them fairly rapidly. It's like somebody, like in Western boxing, you learn jab cross. Well, in the Hop Gar, we learn the clear hand and corkscrew, the Sushinkyun. In other martial art, more commonly known like chop choy. People know chop choy, come over and turn over like this with the leopard fist and that.
Like an overhand right, basically.
Yeah, kind of like that. Yeah, screwing it in like that. And so working with those 6 patterns extensively, just grinding them out. Like Sifu bought his property in North Carolina. Like he had his restaurant, and he had a small house near the restaurant. This was where he lived for a long time. But then he was going to move from there, and he bought a property particularly because it had this very big field, and he bought it so that people could walk the length of this field. So it's like a couple of football fields long in the backyard, and you walk this length back and forth with these basic patterns, just grinding it and grind. So you keep, running that wheel and running that wheel and running that wheel so much that it just becomes part of you. Like anything, how many repetitions, the 10,000 times, whatever. Well, at least,
Right.
keep throwing. So that's where people start out, and then they move on to deeper forms, single wing flip, 7-star linking, inner 8 gate form, the plum flower fist, flying crane, things like this. But what we always concentrate on is really less movements, more reps. So even though people will go into these things, they'll usually specialize it somewhere. This form is the one that really connects. So they specialize and figure out the boxing from this form, as opposed to going to this form and this next form and this next form, and then you have all these forms, and what do you know? How are you going to apply? How are you going to apply this thing? They're not going to apply it because there's too much time spread apart, just doing this and that and whatever, and they're not grinding on getting the reps in for the boxing. So that's the Kung Fu way, right? Deep work, or many reps and getting that idea. That's the only way. So that's the basic progression, and then interlaced in that is whether people want to go into iron body, iron palm, whether they want to how deeply they're going to go with the Mook Yei Pai, which is wooden ear plates. So those are the blocks that we swing to go along with our training, and everybody learns them. And people, again, they have to figure themselves out. A lot of people, it's just I just put it up today on my Instagram, actually, to remind myself and remind others. Like, a lot of people quit early on because of the hard, arduous work that's in there with many of these tasks, and also the length of time that is required to get somewhere with these things and understand what the training tools are. So when people pick up those blocks, we're doing it every week in the gym, but are they going to do it at home? Are they going to hit the mukjang, the dummy at home? Are they going to practice the form at home, and so on and so forth? Again, all of this, right? If they don't, they only going to get so far.
Right.
And this is one of the issues with any martial art, is just how much time people have to dedicate to it and where they can take it. So, but that's
how much bitter they're willing to eat, right? Like,
man.
Like I like to tell my students, I said, it's gong fu, right? It's supposed to be hard. If it wasn't, it would be easy fu, right? So how many, just give us an idea of, like, because you've thrown out quite a few names of different forms. How many forms are there, like, in the whole Tibetan Hop Gar system?
Well, so again, ours don't have as many. Like, some people's, so we're Tibetan Hop Gar. Then there's the white crane or Tibetan white crane, and then there's Lama Pai, right? And then some people held on to or renamed themselves back to Lion's Roar Kung Fu. They're all sister arts, and all of them have different number of forms. And Sifu Chin, we have the single wing flip, the 7-star linking, the inner 8 gate form, the plum flower fist form, and then the flying crane form. So that's only 5, and then the 6 basic patterns ahead of that. But even with that, Sifu never emphasized going over all these forms, doing this, doing that, go into it. You have to find the essence of these movements. How are you going to do that when 300 different forms? You got practice. Like, you don't have time.
Right.
What's a boxer know? They know jab, cross, hooks and uppercuts. That's it. Like they got 6 things, and what do they do over again? Still work on the same thing. That's the
Right.
best example of how it needs to be done. It's how it needs to be done with our kung fu or your kung fu or somebody else's kung fu, whatever. That's what needs to be done. Now, if you want to be really good at presenting forms and just doing that, then that's a good way to go. You learn all these different forms and keep learning different, dances, as it were,
Right.
and keep doing that. But ours is limited, and again, Sifu never pressured people to keep learn more form, keep learn more form. They said do the form and get the essence out of it. That's
Mhm.
what you're supposed to. So, yeah, but then there's mukjang forms. There's and then you have the wooden ear plates forms, and then he taught me stuff with the kwandao, which was not particular to the hop gar, and some spear work that way, and double broadsword and that. But that was like it was more for conditioning, and so like keeping it in the mind of, okay, what is this for? Well, this is for conditioning. That's what this is for. This is not, that's why we don't you don't see us presenting many forms
Right.
because
Right.
that's not what we do it for, you know
Um,
so
can you give us some idea of what the partner training looks like?
yeah, so we'll do stuff with just like empty hand, so no gloves or things like that, trying to condition the arm. So maybe you do, so like a lot of arts have um, uh das sing. So hit the 3 stars,
Yeah.
the forearm thing, and they even have competitions. Like the Hunga people like to have the da sing competitions, which I think is awesome. But we don't do dasam. We do daising, is so hit 2 stars, because it's a flow through, pass through drill. One of the big elements of the hop gar and trying to develop it is being able to keep that circle rolling all the time, so you're never getting hooked up and stop. So like there's not stuff where we're stop on somebody.
Mhm.
We're not trying to train that way. Always like hitting and bypassing, hitting through, one way or another. It's either hit and bypass or hitting through, and the circle keeps rolling. So when we condition, like with the partner, we learn on the forearms that way first, iron bridge stuff, and working so people feel what it's like to knock through arms and then eventually start knocking through the body, and then putting pads on, so people can get the resistance of the body, just like you see people with the belly pads or chest pads and thigh pads and things like that. So doing the conditioning that way, with people. Also, just like tie pad drills and mitt work, going over the hands that way, and then eventually just working on sparring, and letting people try. We always try and somebody's got to be like a kickboxer. Somebody's got to emulate Muay Thai or something other than us. So our people are getting used to seeing what most people throw, because most people don't do like what we do. Excuse me. They do more jab, cross, hook, this kind of idea, and a lot of low kick and straight front kick stuff. So we have to play that role for each other. So
Yeah, I think
there's a lot of.
that was one of the things that I was talking about with Sifu Alex Richter when we were discussing Wing Chun, and that was one of his criticisms of modern Wing Chun, where they've gotten sort of very Wing Chun versus Wing Chun, sort of in their mindset of and their approach to sticky hand training, whereas
Yeah.
his view with the original approach to sticky hand was that it was supposed to be effective against other styles, not against Wing Chun. So I think there's sort of a lot of overlap there between what you're just saying and his other thoughts on that as well. So we
Yeah.
started talking. You've mentioned this already a little bit, a few times, So this is sort of a two-part question, but some of the most common training tools within the Hop Gar system, and the most unconventional, which I think from my point of view is going to be the Mook Yei, I think is the wooden ear plates. Can you tell us more about some of that stuff?
Yeah, so it's I mean, the easiest way to dumb it down is to think about it as like kettlebell-esque training, because everybody knows what a kettlebell is now.
Right.
And the thing with the kettlebell is typically is that when people go through the ranges of motion, they're doing more like almost Olympic lifts and things like that style, or just the kettlebell swing, which, you know, again, all really good exercises. But what the wooden ear plates allow you to do is go through the same punches that we throw all the time with this extended weight, and they're not that heavy, man. Like the basic small pair that most people should work with is only like right around 12 pounds a piece. And but with the shape of them, it draws from your grip, it draws out really well, and the paddle shape of it creates, you start getting a bladed resistance through the air, so you're getting this mild resistance from the shape and the draw of the weight from the shape. So what it does is it helps you like stretch everything out, and we're never snapping with these implements, right? Because with the Hop Gar system, we don't emphasize snapping. Like, you know, like turn out, you see people turn over the punches, you know, doing this kind of way. We don't emphasize that. That's like in the beginning stages to get kids and new people understanding like this is what this shape is, but quickly transition away from that because we want that smooth, more wave-like power coming through and going through target. So the blocks are one of the best teachers of that exact thing, because to move them well, you have to be strong, one, but you start coordinating the waistline. You know, everybody want, you know, throw the power from the waist. But you also start getting the length out of your arm. You're letting that block carry, and you're following the momentum and then squeezing back with it. So it's never really stopping. This thing, the blocks are cycling through just like we want the punches to, and we're throwing the same techniques just with these weights in our hands. So you'll see a lot of them in other in our sister arts and things like that are made. And the reason for this, I believe, is because it's really problematic to make these things. We've been through multiple people trying to make them for us. Like, this is professional level carpenters and stuff, and it's just so many man hours to make these things because they fan out both directions at the bottom. And when with that, anyway, so it's a problematic thing. So most people, what they do is they make them straight, like just a straight block. And it's very easy to do that, and that's okay. It's an okay substitute, but it's not the same. And like the physics of that, I've even looked into the physics of it, like weight distribution away from the center, and you could put it like a ball at the bottom and just have a handle and stuff, and it's supposed to be the same, but it's not. I've done, you know, direct comparative testing with the blocks and with other things to try and emulate it, and nothing moves the same. So whoever figured it out, that's a thing that I don't know. I don't know who the first person was to have blocks. Well, I mentioned Wang Yanlum as the head of the Canton 10 Tigers. His disciple Longhorn Wing was purported to have a 70-pound pair of stone blocks that he used. His nickname was the Giant of Canton. So I don't know whether this is fact. I have a really heavy pair, and to get them moving correctly around you, one, and the size of them, you have to do some movement away from your body that kind of messes up the boxing movement. So I don't know you know, how I feel about that in the end, but my guess is that they were very heavy regardless.
Right, and I think so is one of the things that I think just in general about the strength and conditioning methods of let's say of China and of India and Tibet, like that region, compared to the strength and conditioning methods, like, so let's say, of the West, where in the West we tend to be much more sagittally oriented, so sort of up and down and forward and backward, and a lot of the movements that are used in Western strength and conditioning sort of reflect those movement patterns, whereas like you were saying with the wooden ear plates, that is much more, takes you out into the frontal plane and the horizontal planes, in your movements by comparison, rather than just staying focused on that sagittal plane. And I think that, too, is that once you start moving out into the frontal plane and into the horizontal plane, and you've got a weight like that that's extending the moment arm, right? That now you have to, it's going to force you to control your core a lot more, right? Because that moment. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm just agreeing with you. You're doing a great job. Keep going.
So yeah, I think that's one, and also one of the things that I think was interesting too is that usually, like in the martial arts, right, we talk a lot about the ego, right, and sort of that the martial arts creates a sense, or develops a sense, of humility in you. And one of the things that I remember you talking about when we were in Texas at the Legends of Kung Fu tournament, because you were doing a workshop, I think, on the wooden ear plates. And that was one of the things that you're talking about, where it's like, hey, get your ego in check, because once you start to play with the wooden ear plates, that everybody makes the same mistake, as they try to go too heavy, too fast, and then they end up hurting themselves.
Yep.
Yeah, so that was one of the things that always stuck with me from, like I said, that time when we were in Texas together. So moving on. Okay, so what do you think is one of the most unique things about the Tibetan Hop Gar system compared to other martial arts?
Boy, there's a lot. Well, the fact that it came from Tibet. One, they call them the dub, like DUB or DOB, dub monks that protected the temple. They weren't necessarily the greatest people in the town, and they had an opportunity to go to the temple and seek refuge there, as long as they said they would help protect the temple. So they trained these guys in the martial art to be protectors of the temple. And the Buddhist goddess Marisi, what's funny is the ninja ended up praying to Marisi eventually as their she's the goddess of war, so like kind of like Mars, I guess. So if you see a photo of her if you ever look her up, that there's she's on like a chariot or some sort of like this, and being drawn by 7 pigs, and these 7 pigs are monks that she saved when the temple was under attack, and that she turned them into pigs to hide them, and then they helped her and they carry her away, and this kind of thing. So that mixture of Tibetan Buddhism into the Hop Gar that did still carry through. Sifu was a practicing Tibetan Buddhist, and the Tibetan Buddhism is very different, than, well, not very different, I say, but it's mixed with the local religions that were in Tibet already, and then, carried over so many different, the Hindu influences and that too. So you see this broad connection of all the Buddhism and the Tibetan Buddhism and the Bon and the Hindu, the religions all mixing and coming in together, and how they influence, your teacher is Buddhist, right? And so it's such a part of understanding the kung fu systems of China, Confucianism, the Buddhism, and the Taoism. You have to embrace all of these things if you're ever really going to understand these arts that are coming out of China, because they're woven intimately into it. And ours just happens to be Tibetan Buddhism. And I think one of the, I guess one of the most unique things is. I haven't heard it. It might not be, maybe it's not that unique, but I haven't heard it that much anywhere else in other systems. Is we have these 4 basic principles, the guideposts of the system: Chan, Sim, Chun, Jit, right? And so everybody knows Jit from Jeet Kune Do, right? The intercepting, right? So people know this idea already. But the first one, Chan, is cruelty or destruction. And so like a lot of people, I think, see that word, hear that word, and it elicits this response of only one thing, which is part of the principle, and that's to rip up the roots of the thing so it can't come back at you, and so that's part of that. But it's also this very, again, intimate connection of the Buddhist tenets of destroying the self, right? So like, and for you to be, so then you bridge that into the ideas of warriors going into battle and of any kind. I don't care. The assumption that you're already dead, so it's freeing. So you destroy the self so that you be free to do the kung fu, to execute the movement without hesitation, without that holdback, with a full heart, because it's done already, right? So that part of the Chan, one I think is misunderstood or not understood or left behind, or however you want to say. But again, I don't hear that as one of the precepts in most of that. When I try and explain it to the parents of the kids that are at our school, okay, so cruelty, just listen.
Right.
I don't want my son to be a bully, and so right, I'm not trying to make him a bully. I'm not trying to do that at all. This is actually a different thing. We're trying to get our egos in check, and we're trying to get our our self in check, so that we can do what we need to should it arise. That's all. So
right. There is that does remind me of I think if you've ever read the Hagakure, which is the book of the book of the samurai, and they do talk a little bit about that same thing in there, where it's like that the samurai should meditate every day as though he's already dead, so that you you can commit yourself fully to to the fight. But I think actually, if we go back a little bit too on what you were saying about this concept of cruelty and or like uprooting, right? Like uprooting your your ego, or again that concept of cruelty, like where in the old days in Chinese martial arts, where they would talk about that to be kind to your opponent is to be cruel to yourself.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's a lot there that we could unpack at some point if we get you back on again, and we could go deep into that. So let me ask you, you can take 2 different approaches to this, whichever one that you think is more appropriate. Either what do you think is the most common misconceptions about Hop Gar in particular, or what do you think is some of the most common misconceptions about Kung Fu?
I'll give you one of each. I'll give you a quick one on Hop Gar. The most common misconception about Hop Gar is that it's Hungar. That's that one.
Fair enough.
Because the Hungar and Hungar are basic, known far farther afield and than we are. So we get confused that way a lot. That's the most common misconception. But as far as Kung Fu goes, is that Kung Fu is not a valid form of self-protection, or a valid form of boxing. And I think that's the fault of a lot of history, and a lot of oppression, in China, and then coming out of China, and then the use of martial arts just simply as a vehicle of monetary gain, and not actual, there became less need for the arts in the way of, just protecting themselves. People got comfortable, and there was less strife, and so on and so forth. That old thing about hard times make strong people, and good times make weak ones. This kind of idea. So the Kung Fu suffered for a long time, as did many other arts. I mean, you look at so many different arts that were coming from comfortable places. They suffered because they weren't being pushed. But like the inner city boxing gyms, where people were hard up for a way to survive and make money, those gyms kept coming up, and their skill sets remained valid or improved, right? And so now I hope against all hopes that, just like we were talking about earlier, you mentioned the Wing Chun master's name, and his thoughts on like what Wing Chun is trying to get at. Like, you have to pressure test your stuff, like, consider yourself fake. This is ridiculous what I'm doing here, and I want this person to challenge that idea. Like, you don't believe me, come challenge this idea, so that you have to improve what you're doing, and not use, like, and I'm not saying the next thing I'm going to say. I'm not saying anything about any particular schools or anything, nothing, right? It happens all over the place. But I see so many Kung Fu schools, just like the Shaolin Temple. I'll pick them out. The Shaolin Temple has a Sanda program. Why do they have a Sanda program? Well, so they could go do sport, of course, right? But it's also because there's not enough people understanding how to box with all the other boxing forms that they have, right? Because there's too many. There's so much stuff, right? So maybe one guy understands how to box with it, but not a group of people, right? How do you get people to understand what it is you're doing to a level that they can then go apply it, and stay honest to what it is that you're trying? Why am I going to walk up and down or hit the bag 1,000 times with our straight punch, Chun Choi? Why am I going to do that and then not use it? And then I go back to, like, jab, cross, hook, and kick. That seems crazy to me, but I see it all the time. I see it from schools all over the country and the world. I see it. It's not just in our country. It's all over the place. And it's because, again, I just, luck of the draw, right? I met Sifu Chen, somehow good fortune. Sifu Chen was a fighter. His teacher, Ing Ming, was a fighter. His teacher, Wang Yanlong, was a fighter, right? Every single one of them, they fought either on stage or in street or wherever. They were all, this is what they were interested in. That's what they wanted to do. That's what I wanted to do. So I fell in, I got lucky, right? But if your teacher wasn't a boxer of some sort, how is that person going to teach you to be a boxer with the stuff that you're using? So a lot of times those teachers then look to something else that's more easily understood, like jab, cross, hook, this kind of basic training idea. And again, not that there's anything wrong with the techniques. They work, they're beautiful, it's fine. But is that your Kung Fu? And why do you spend so much time on your Kung Fu if you're going to then go do this other thing, in
Right.
application? I wish for everybody to find, if you're going to spend that much, the inordinate amount of hours that is required to understand your kung fu, I wish that for everyone to be able to box with it. That's what I dream about that all the time. They made me happy. So
so what do you think some of the most common mistakes that beginners make when they're getting involved with martial arts?
put way too much speed and power into techniques that they have no understanding of. That's the biggest one. And then I guess the second biggest is just what's next? What's next? What's next?
Right.
What's next? Another repetition of that is what's next. So so yeah, I mean that's the most common one is like people, like they're coming into a boxing gym, like young or old, this happens to people with experience and not having any experience. They all do the same thing, try and go really hard, overuse their body, don't make correct shape. They concentrate on power and speed, and then it becomes like a mess. And so like we're forever talking about, slow down, take it easy, build the proper shape, and then start putting a little more speed on it, and then start backing it up with a little more muscle, and then yeah, you got something. You'll figure it out. But it's sometimes leaving that ego sitting at the door is a difficult task for people. Again, you're coming into a sweaty gym with a bunch of gorillas, and then I'm supposed to take it easy. Like, so that's, to me, that's what I see the most is just, going at it. But it's from a good place. And that's why I was trying to emphasize that. It's like, look, you want to do it. You want to do it really well. You're driving yourself to go hard, to put hard effort out there. But actually what's going to pay off is you easing up and going a little bit slower and smoother. And then eventually you do all that. We have exercises that you can go hard on, but just doesn't make sense with the boxing most of the time because you're going to have a bad shape, and that's what's going to stick with you. So
yeah, make it right first and then try to put power on it.
yeah.
So last question specifically on martial arts in general, or about Hop Gar. What do you think the value, right? So it's like we live in the safest time in history and the safest country in the world. What do you think the value of traditional martial arts is still in the world of firearms and mixed martial arts? And
Oh man, having all the your bodily control, having confidence in yourself, and the awareness, your first, best, and most important self defense, quote unquote, thing, guns, knives, sticks, cars, whatever, is being aware. There was just there's a fighter from Brazil that was just killed, I think yesterday. He came out of training and he got hit by a bus, right? So like your awareness all the time. I see people on their phones and on their headphones and stuff while they're walking around. They don't even acknowledge vehicles. They don't acknowledge other people. To me, that is bananas, And there's that kid that was on the bus that saved that busload of kids. The bus driver had a heart attack or something, passed out, and the kid he didn't have a phone or anything, so he was aware and he knew about how to drive a little bit and had watched the bus driver stop this bus so many times that he knew how to do it. So he just took the wheel and pulled the thing over and hit the brakes slowly and saved this group of kids while the bus driver was having a heart attack, and got them to call 911 on their phones because he didn't have one. Stuff like being trained in awareness, like, which is, I'm not trying to advertise for you, bro, but martial art of awareness, hashtag. So, training your awareness, training your physical skills, training for your health. You have all of these side benefits other than just the boxing, right? And so that can keep you out of a bunch of stuff, can help you control situations even without using your hands. And also notice if somebody's got a gun, a knife, or otherwise, and what your best decision making is along that path. And then if you're training correctly with your martial art, again, your pressure testing stuff, on a constant basis, right? And building those skill sets, then should you ever need to, you can apply it. But that's reliant upon. Siva Chen always said, we want to be a good kung fu man. You gotta have three things. You gotta have hard hand, you gotta have guts, and you gotta have training partner. If you got those three things, you can make yourself into a good kung fu man. So a valid practitioner. And so you have to be able to pressure test this stuff to make it valid in the world, whatever year it is. I don't, we taught these techniques to people being deployed overseas with the army in different sorts. We did stuff with the Shura meetings and preparation for that, and a lot of it was simply the training of awareness of situation and, okay, what's my best move? We are armed, we are unarmed. What is our so on and so forth with that breakdown. So I don't. A lot of people like that dude over in China, the MMA fighter that was challenging all the masters.
Yeah, Xu Xiaodong.
Yeah, Su Sadong. He was, he's challenging people that, like, first of all, those people shouldn't have taken the challenge, because they should have been honest with themselves and realized that they didn't box on a regular basis. That was just stupid, on their part. But their ego got them believing some stuff that's shenanigans. And so at least he exposed some stuff, but he should challenge people that do valid kung fu, like that are pressure testing it on a daily basis. Because if he did, he would meet somebody that was more prepared to give him something back. So I think traditional martial arts are still very valid. They're the basis of MMA. Most of our arts are a mix. Our art is certainly a mix that we practice and put out. We do Xingyi, Bakwa, Tai Chi, Hop Gar, and you got to pick your lane and go deep. You got to figure yourself out, and you got to go deep. Otherwise you're not going to have anything. But it's still 100% valid. It just depends on where you're learning.
So we're gonna switch gears a little bit right now as we're wrapping up. If you could go back in time and talk to your younger self as you're just getting started with martial arts, what do you know now that you wish you knew then?
Man, I don't know. Boy, that's I mean, I think just the thing I was talking about, I made the same mistake that I tell you what I would tell myself. I tell myself to breathe, because I learned that far too long. Like the idea of qigong, like I have little kids doing qigong already, and like embracing those words and understanding that they can control their breath and do things with their breath that is so impactful to their life in general, let alone sports performance. And excuse me. And so as I was coming up, I didn't realize till I was probably, are you taking off, babe? All right. Excuse me 1 second.
No worries.
I say foot. I was in my I was 9 when I finally learned this lesson. Excuse me. I was about 19, and I was Michigan State University, and I was part of a karate club there, and we had people from all over the state that would come and fight. We would have Friday night fights, and so we'd have all these different forms of karate, kung fu, golden gloves, boxers, like all kinds of stuff. Everybody coming down to this little basement gym at Michigan State and throwing down. And I realized that I was gassing, like, and part of it was because of my nervous system, right? And, I was amped up, and I was nervous about situations and stuff like that, because I was getting my pardon me. Are we allowed to curse on this channel?
Yeah, go ahead. Speak freely.
I was getting my ass kicked a lot. It's the long and short of it. And so, the apprehension, makes your nerves go certain directions. And then on top of that, I was holding my breath and gassing myself. And I just I came to this ridiculous realization that you're starving yourself here, man. And so I would be actively fighting with people and yelling out loud. I'd be like, breathe, breathe. And they think I was talking to them. But really, I was just talking to me because I had to do it somehow. And I didn't have any, at that point, I didn't have any Qigong training or this idea of that other than like from swimming and soccer, I knew how to breathe. But in this realm, because somebody's punching you in the face and kicking you in the ribs and taking you down and doing these different things, it was a different breathing that I had to embrace. And so I think I would tell myself, much earlier on when I started, say, hey, you're going to want to learn how to breathe. Let's put that as a priority. And like in the school today, at our Kun, we emphasize it so much because so many people are hypertensive just because they can't breathe correctly. And so I think that would be the thing that I know now that I wish I'd known a little bit earlier. It wasn't that late, but it would have helped.
Yeah, I mean, I had the same experience as I went out there for my first Lei Tai fight, and I held my breath like the whole first round. Stumbled off the platform, like totally gassed. So yes, it's breathing is number one priority.
Yep.
So second to last question.
Okay.
What is the book that you've gifted most often to fellow martial artists or to your students? What book would you recommend most? Doesn't necessarily have to be a martial arts book, but something that's going to help people develop themselves.
Man, I'm terrible for this because there's so many good books. What is it? It's one of my favorite stories, and I have it locked in my head. And it's Bone Games. Is a brilliant story of a runner who gets essentially he gets caught in the mountains late one night, and as he's coming home, the fog sets in, and he loses his way as he's climbing down this section where he usually knows where to climb, and he gets caught unable to go up, unable to go down. So his choice that he's left with is letting go, and he ends up falling onto a cliff abutment and passes out for a time. When he wakes up, he realizes that he's injured, maybe not critically, but not great, and he needs to get himself down the mountain. And the space that he was left in from that fall allows him to, as he described it, he ran down the mountain and he could see the rock falling past him as he was like running and breaking this rock apart. And he did something that he never thought possible for a human, and went through this experience and then continues to look for this same space. And though it's not a martial art book, I think it's just such a great reminder of the potential of the human and what we can accomplish if we open our minds to possibility. And in the practice of martial arts, so many people say, I can't say it again like it's a chant for them. And instead of that, approaching all of these things with, so in Tai Chi and Qigong, there's the idea of most people say song, they just say song, but it's feng song. So the feng is release, and song is relax. So how you get the relax, you let go. That's what this is suggestive of. But most people just say song. It's like every song, relax. But I always remember Sifu Chen. He went to we went to this thing is at the Crown Plaza in Fayetteville. It was a wellness exhibition or wellness conference, and there was a professor from Harvard at the conference, and he was lecturing on mindfulness and relaxation. And he's like, "You just have to relax, relax, relax." And Steven, we were listening to this, and so we go around somewhere else, and Steven says, "He says you got to relax. How are you going to relax? How are you supposed to relax? They don't tell you how to relax." He's like, "Well, so that's what this release part is. You let go of what you let go of. Talk again about let go of your ego, let go of your intention, let go of your musculature. You let things hang. You talk about all the structural stuff, things like this. Let go, let go, let go, and let go of the idea that you can't. Let go of it. So then all possibility exists. The Wu Ji, the no limits, the void space, all possibility exists, so that you can create what it is that you think you can, and it doesn't have a boundary. The only boundary is the amount of hours you're willing to put in. So, I think that story does a good job, because he spends the rest of his life looking for that spot through running, the runner's high. And he said that, within the book, it's basically, I didn't find it. I found something close, but he didn't reach that spot again. But what allowed him to get to that space? Was it a head trauma that caused it? Was it, the energetic burst? What was it? So I like that book, because it's a fun read, and it's instructive of possibility.
I mean, it sounds kind of like, he was in a life and death situation, and that helped put him into like that flow state, that what everybody talks about, where it's like suddenly you can do something that seems impossible. But it's been there all along. It's just something in the way that's blocking you from.
Right.
Right. So last question, Chris. Where can people follow up with you if they want to follow you, they want to get in touch with you and see what you're doing?
I believe Instagram's 7-Star Kung Fu, and we're 7-Star Kung Fu Academy.com. That's just our page for, if you wanted to come do classes or something. There's I wouldn't say there's anything too exciting on there. But we're on YouTube. You just look up my name. It's the easiest way. Look up Sifu's name, David Chen. See some of his videos. There's some good historical stuff on him. We're in North Carolina, so if people are coming through and you're in Chapel Hill and you want to catch a workout, come on.
All right, sounds good. And I wish you all the success with your school. It's like I said, I feel really fortunate to know you and to be watching your success. It's like it's good for all of us, and you're keeping the real old school Kung Fu alive. And so I want to thank you for your time this morning, and thank you on behalf of Grandmaster Sam Chen. The battery on my light just kicked out, so it's telling me that it's time to wrap up. Again, thank you for your time. I appreciate you very much, Chris, and we'll see you on the next one.
Oh, let me try and get it to you, Matt. There we go. Got it. Cheers. Thanks so much for having me, and shout out to Master Chen. Sorry to miss you, but I know you're doing really well out there. Take care.
All right, we'll see you next time.